Hari Om, everybody. Namaskaram. Welcome. So, we had a bit of a detour, diversion last week. This week, we're going back to finishing off, completing our chapter 3 summary. Again, very important verses, but it was also very good to know about the parampara, I think, because that is the introduction, the way that chapter 4 is introduced. It is also good to have a separate topic to actually know what is sampradaya, what is parampara, very important topics of Bhagavad Gita as well. But here we come back to, again, Bhagavan addressing issues of the mind. Chapter 3 is very important, actually, to understand how the mind functions, how the mind works. And the final verses of chapter 3 actually have this discussion in more depth. How does desire arise? What do we do with desire? Is desire wrong? All of these questions are answered in the final verses. So what we saw last time, we left it off at Karma Yoga. So from verse 30 to 35, the significance of Karma Yoga is highlighted and the teaching is summarized. And these verses we saw are enough to understand what Karma Yoga is and how one should do what's to be done in life. And of these verses, we left it off at a very important verse, not just of chapter 3, of the whole Bhagavad Gita, which is verse 30. 30 is a very important verse in chapter 3, but the whole of the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan here brings in all the components of Karma Yoga in one verse. So, Mai sarvani karmani, sanyas adhyatma chetasa, he says, with the discriminating mind given to this pursuit of self-knowledge. So discriminating mind in Shastra, we have to understand what is discriminating. It is not racial discrimination or gender discrimination. It is sifting between two things. What is real, what is unreal, what is true in life, and what is ephemeral. That is one kind of discriminative analysis as well. But we'll see there's more discriminative analysis that is done, should be done in life. So he says this Adhyatma Chetasa means the discriminative analysis of what I really want in life. What is the goal of my life? I should have no doubt over the goal. Only when I'm clear about the goal will the way of life make sense. This way of life that Bhagavan is prescribing will only really make sense when I'm clear about what I want in my life. So that is very important. First, level of discriminative analysis. And the next one, how do I perform actions? Mai sarvani karmani, if you remember, he said, renounce all your actions to me, give all your actions to me, offer everything to me. In that way, you are unburdened of all the results. If you offer everything to the Lord, why do you need to worry? That is what he says in these words that he uses. 3 very key words, very beautiful words Bhagavan uses in these verses. He says, nirashihi. Why do you worry for the future? Let me take care of your future. I will manifest at my time what I feel is good for you, what I feel is good for your growth. That word, nirashihi, conveys this fact that Bhagavan will take care of the future. And if he takes care of the future, you can be prepared for any type of result and not worry. Why? Because it is prasadam. It comes from his order. It comes from his hands. And if it is seen as prasadam, then my reaction to anything that I get is not going to be, especially the unpleasant result, is not going to be as harsh as it would be if I think I'm in charge of my life. So, nirashihi, we saw this very, very wonderful word. Be prepared to accept whatever happens in your life. And nirmama, we also saw that nirmama means you don't claim ownership over the results. You are not responsible for the successes or the failures, so you cannot judge yourself. Self-judgment, depending on what happens to you in life, is, again, a subjective perception. It is not an objective perception. If we truly knew what our full past was, Purva Janma, all our past lives, if we knew what future Janmas we're going to have, if we had this vision, wider vision than just this now, this is happening to me, this I don't like. This narrow vision is all that we have. But if we saw the broader vision, nirmama, we would realize that this judgment, self-judgment is unwarranted. It is happening to me, but there's a reason for it. I don't need to judge myself as a failure because something unpleasant has manifested. No, it is always what Bhagavan, the Karma Yogi, the thought is Bhagavan is doing this for my best. He's giving this for my best. It is not a failure. It is for my growth alone. So it is a whole shift of vision, shift of drishti. Actually, Bhagavan is saying, shift your vision. Don't stay in your narrow vision in life. Just look at it from a broader perspective. And Vigata Jwaraha was the third word he used for this verse. So this is also a very wonderful word to show that one should not lose their balance in life. Do you falter and fail at every hurdle that you face in your life? No. A karma yogi, because he is nirashihi, because he has nirmamatvam, he has all the other words that Bhagavan has said. He is vigata jwaraha, which means totally fever-free. Literally, jwara we have in many Indian languages, it means fever. Here, Vigata Jwaraha means he's without fever. There's no fever for him for anything to happen. He's quite happy. He does what's to be done. He puts in 100% effort into his work. It is not, any effort. Oh, I'll just do that work and finish. No. Why does he put in 100% effort? Because it's an offering to Bhagavan. So that is, as an offering, he gives everything in his life. And disappointments do come. Everybody has to face disappointments in life. We cannot avoid. But we learn to avoid frustration and anger because things didn't go our way. This is the word. Vigata Jwaraha brings in samatvam, equipoise in my mind, mental equipoise and relative stability of mind. And a pure mind, we saw, is a peaceful mind. So we left it at this point, last point in our summary. Now, in the 31st and the 32nd verses, Bhagavan exhorts all to live this life of Karma Yoga. He is encouraging everybody, live what I'm telling you to live. Live this life. Why? For your own spiritual growth, I'm talking about this. And he also goes as far as saying, those who choose not to live this life, who choose not to listen to his words, they are lost spiritually. They will become lost spiritually, which means what? Which means they will still be in that samsara chakkar, going round and round with all the ups and downs that one has to face, all the, buffeted by the pairs of opposites that everybody has to go through, and they will be stuck there. So Bhagavan is offering, he's saying, I'm offering you a way out. If you listen to and follow these teachings I'm telling you, and he adds, without criticism, without being cynical, the teaching will free the individual from the hold of karma, the results of karma phalas, the results of action or karma phalas. But he says in these verses, despite knowing the fact that karma yoga is the primary means for self-purification, for mental purification, for self-knowledge, if you choose not to follow this lifestyle, you will remain deluded and you will be denying yourself, not anybody else. You will be denying yourself of the opportunity to spiritually grow in life, because whole life is for what? It is for spiritual growth. Material, all this material aspects of life, yes, they are needed, they're necessary, but what is the purpose of human birth? Shastra is very clear. You've come here for a purpose. It is not a purposeless existence we're leading. There is a goal towards our life. That goal is given by the scriptures, given by the Veda, and that goal is self-discovery. That goal is discovery of Bhagavan. The goal is to leave this planet. When we leave, we should leave happily, saying, I've done everything. I've accomplished everything I need to be accomplished. I am happy. I am ready to go. I am ready because I know I'm not limited by this body, mind, senses. I am limitless self. No fear in me of death. I will never ever die. There was no birth for me. There is no death for me. That is the ultimate knowledge we finally get to, and we should leave this jagat with that knowledge. That is what Bhagavan says here. And one of the words, key words he uses in this verse is Shraddhavantaha, with total commitment to this teaching, total commitment. This word Shraddha comes up all through the Bhagavad Gita. You will see again and again, every chapter Bhagwan brings it up. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. We'll see in chapter 4, verse 39. The one who is committed to this teaching, one who is committed to this path of inquiry will gain ultimate joy, will gain the ultimate result. Whereas he says in these verses, asuya, he uses a word, asuya means critical. There are those who are critical. People who come here may not be critical, but there are people who criticize the teaching. Those who are critical, asuya means who criticize the teaching. Also, the teacher is also criticized along with the teaching. They lose the chance, Bhagavan says, that is offered by destiny to learn this knowledge, to study this knowledge. And that is why, very beautifully, our Shastra, Veda, actually brings in an opening prayer. If you notice the opening prayer, Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu. The last line is what? Ma Vidvishavahe. Ma Vidvishavahe recognizes what Bhagavan is saying in this verse. May not any iota of anger or frustration come between the teaching and the student, between the teacher and the student. So the knowledge takes place. It is obstacle free. Ma Vidvishavahe. That is what Bhagavan is saying here. Asuya. Asuya means don't have this criticism. Don't have this asuya. Be anasuya. Have the shraddha, have the commitment towards it. But Arjuna has a doubt. Arjuna's in the next verses, he brings in a doubt, a very valid doubt, because he's heard this verse said by Bhagavan before, earlier in the 3rd chapter. He says, what is the need for mental purification? Basically, he's asking, what is the need for mental purification if everything is governed by nature anyway? So if you remember, the beginning of the 3rd chapter is very, very good question by Arjuna. He remembers what Krishna had told him in the beginning of the 3rd chapter, not even beginning, few verses back, 27, verse 27. Bhagavan has said, Prakrite kriyamanani gunaih karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartahamiti manyate. Bhagavan had told him, actions are performed in various ways, impelled by the gunas of Prakriti. You are pushed to act by sattva, rajas, tamas, the gunas, the qualities of nature. And this is the whole thing. Arjuna is confused. What is the point of doing all this if I'm forced to act by nature? My nature forces me to act. Then Bhagavan, in the 33rd verse, Arjuna expresses this doubt. He says, Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakrite jnanavanapi. Prakritim yanti bhutani nigrahah kim karishyati. So similar to that 27th verse, he asks here, if we all, including wise people, act according to our own nature, what is the use of controlling ourselves? What is the use of controlling our senses? What is the use of managing our mind? What is the use of all this? Basically saying, why the effort to change ourselves? If everything is nature, what's the point? Why can't I just do what I like to do in line with my nature, governed by my likes and dislikes? It's a very valid question. All human beings will have this question. What is the use of consciously living a life of karma yoga lifestyle? Is it even feasible? So this is the type of, I'm just saying the gist of Arjuna's question in this verse. He also, in this verse, he's actually also saying, what's the point in free will? There's no free will. If everyone goes by one's nature, where is free will then? Human beings, he's asking Bhagavan, are human beings equal to animals then? Animals also propelled by nature. Nigrahah kim karishyati. If we can't manage our nature, then it seems like everything seems like a contradiction. Oh Lord. But it is not contradiction. Bhagavan will explain to him very beautifully. Next few verses, he clarifies all of this. Purusharthas are discussed in the Shastra. Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha. These are Purusharthas. What is Purushartha? Purushena artyate iti Purushartha. That which is desired by all human beings. That means when you desire something and you act on it, what does that imply? You have choice. You do have choice over action in life. You may not have choice over result, but you have definitely got choice over action. So we cannot say, it's an invalid question. You cannot say, how can I control my nature? No, you have been given a free will. You have a choice. So the Lord replies here with a very famous verse, oft quoted verse of the Bhagavad Gita. And the elaboration of the likes and dislikes topic begins, which started in chapter 2. It starts again in this verse. He elaborates on it. He says, Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragadvesho vyavastito tayorna vashamagachet tau hyasya paripantino. This verse very beautifully states facts. It begins the topic of why the why of karma yoga, and the purpose of the whole Gita study can be said to be stated in this verse. It is raga dvesha management. Whole of Bhagavad Gita is to train the mind to manage binding likes, binding dislikes. Because every object in creation, every object in this Jagat has the potential to trigger longing or aversion. Everything we see, either we like something or we don't like it, or we're indifferent. This is our 3 reactions in life to things in the world. Indifference to something doesn't create problems. It is our longing and aversion, Bhagavan says, is responsible for disturbance of mind. Indifference to an object doesn't create problems. So it is only longing and aversion. And he says this longing and aversion, what does Bhagavan say? These are paripantino, real enemies of all of us in our life is the raga and dvesha, not external enemies. Our real enemies, our internal enemies. These are the 2 enemies that drag our mind into disturbances, he says. They rob us of our wisdom. And we'll see that in the next verses, how they rob us of our wisdom. But Bhagavan says very clearly in this verse, he warns Arjuna, Tayor navashama gachet, don't come under their spell. Don't let them control you. This binding likes and dislikes, the moment you let them control you in your life, you are gone. They rob the mind. They have the ability to rob the mind of peace. It lives in constant agitation, dissipation of mental energy, and restlessness if you go along with likes and dislikes in your mind. Very important verse, because he says that nigraha kim karishyati. He's responding, if you remember, to Arjuna's question, what use is control? Bhagavan says you have to control, you have to manage in your life these 2 things. This is where free will has to come into the picture. So the first thought that comes in your mind is not under your control. That is your karma. Whatever thought comes in your mind is your karma. But the second thought is in your hands. You need not go with the first thought. What is the second thought? The second thought is that you don't need to go with the first thought. That is how I manage my likes and dislikes in the mind. And he says, he goes on to the next verse, if you do come under their sway, what is the problem? In the 35th verse, he finishes the topic of karma yoga as well. What happens when you come under the sway of likes and dislikes? He says, Shreyan dharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat. And he goes on to say here, this verse basically says, because of strong likes and dislikes, you will eventually end up doing what is not to be done. You will neglect what is to be done in your life and do other things instead. And that is where you go off track. And that is where you create, again, further disturbances in your future life as well. And karma for you, which is not going to manifest as pleasant results for you in your future. When I don't do what's to be done, I do what is not to be done, I'm already in trouble. And likes and dislikes have the ability to put me off track. They have the ability to throw me off. And this is what Bhagavan is saying here. Each one has their dharma to perform. You have to do your dharma, but likes and dislikes, what happens? They overpower your dharma, swadharma, what is to be done by you, and that is forgotten, totally forgotten. It is, you get involved in this verse, he says, you get involved in somebody else's business. You start doing somebody else's job. What somebody else is, their own swadharma, you start doing that because you don't like doing what you like. It is like an example that we give is like a goalkeeper. The goalkeeper's bored standing at the goal and he wants to go and score a goal. So he starts running down the pitch and he wants to be a forward. Now, will that work? You leave your duty, you leave your own goal wide open. Anybody from the opposite team can kick a ball in and get the goal very easily. So this is, again, neglecting one's duty is you're ending in trouble. That is what Bhagavan is warning here. It only leads to fear in the long term because you have created an internal conflict by doing something else, wrong thing at the wrong time. You know, I meant to be doing this, but I don't like to do this. Let me do something else. Let me do something I really like. So again, you go with your likes, do something you like, and you leave what you have to do. Again, that is what Bhagavan is saying. Be careful. It is not going to help you in the long run. And that is why you have regret. And what is this regret and guilt? I should have done this. I should not have done that. I should have done this. I did it. No, so I should have done this. I didn't do it. I shouldn't have done this. I did it. This is called regret in life. Guilt and regret is something we want to avoid. But living this type of life, going with likes and dislikes, we get that. So always remember in this verse, what is the motto of this verse? Happiness doesn't lie in doing what you like to do always, but in liking what you have to do. A real master of life is one who starts liking what they have to do, not always doing what they like to do. So follow your script in life. It may be boring, doesn't matter. But if you live as a karma yogi, you're following your script for the sake of Ishvara, for the sake of a higher goal, you're not bothered about what is happening in, even you will start liking what you have to do in life. So Arjuna, for this verse, he has a response for this verse as well, with a question in the next verse. You can see when we do these summaries, how the dialogue flows. Very beautifully, Arjuna says, Arjuna uvacha atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichanapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. But, oh Lord, Krishna has said this, Paripantino, these are the enemies. But he says, but oh Lord, what if, despite my better judgment, despite me knowing what the right thing to do is, I'm driven to wrongful ways or behavior or acts which are not beneficial to my spiritual life? What is the major obstacle preventing me from living a life of karma yoga, despite knowing the spiritual benefit? This is the type of thinking that Arjuna has now. Something is pushing me to do the wrong thing, even though I know it's wrong, but I'm not able to. You've told me, Paripantino in the previous verse, these are enemies, but I cannot prevent myself from doing the wrong thing. And Lord Krishna answers this question immediately in the next few verses. Very beautifully, he says, in the next few verses, we'll see the answers, but the next few verses are elaboration of chapter 2 verses. As we've said before, chapter 2 is the whole of Bhagavad Gita encapsulated, and everything else is an expansion of chapter 2. So you'll see a lot of verses in chapter 2 being expanded in the consequent chapters. So in this second chapter, Bhagavan, if you remember, he had discussed certain verses, which is the fall of the human mind. Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha, sangasteshu pajayate. He talked about the fall of the human mind and how the human being gets lost in desires. And these verses help us to understand desire in a greater depth. Duryodhana actually, very intelligently, wisely, who can believe Duryodhana can say such a thing? But he actually intelligently summarized this idea, what Arjuna is asking in a verse from the Mahabharata, very famous verse. He says, Janami dharma nacha me pravrittihi, janami adharma nacha me nivrittihi, kenapi devena hridi stitena yata niyuktosmi tata karomi. What does he say here? I know it is wrong, but I cannot avoid. I know what is right, but I can't bring myself to do it. What is it? He says, he recognizes there seems to be some kind of devil in myself, some kind of powerful force in me, which makes me act against my own conscience. This is exactly what Arjuna is saying. So Bhagavan says, responds to Arjuna in the next verse, in the 37th verse, he says, Kama esha krodha eshaha rajo guna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidyenam iha vairinam. What is this obstacle that pushes me? It is desire. It is kama, the conglomerate of all the raga dvesha. Intense desire pushes me to go against what I know is right. And he says, what is responsible for the desire? It is rajoguna in the mind. When somebody is highly rajasic, they have the rajoguna, they will be driven to fulfill their desires. Very ambitious people will have this. There's nothing wrong, but we're just examining what forces us to desire. This rajas pushes us into action. And sometimes when the rajas is too powerful, we forget dharma in pursuing our goals. We forget what is right and wrong in pursuing our goals. What happened to Duryodhana? Exactly like that. It can happen to anybody. Totally, dharma has gone for a toss, and I want to get what I want to get. That's it. It doesn't matter who I hurt on the way. It doesn't matter what I do on the way, but I'm going to get this and I want this. That is called rajas, too much rajas in the mind. Now, Bhagavan has blessed the human mind with 3 shaktis. If you remember, Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti Swarupini. It comes in Lalita Sahasranama. The power of desire, Icha Shakti, the power of action, Kriya Shakti, and the power of knowledge, Jnana Shakti. These are all powers human beings are blessed with. So power meaning they're gifts given to human beings. But when the rajas is too much, what happens? The gift becomes a curse. The Icha Shakti becomes too much. The Kriya Shakti becomes too much when rajas is predominant. And Jnana Shakti, which is the power of viveka, the power of discrimination, what happens? It gets subdued, it goes, so that you're not able to see what is the right thing in life to do. So it is only a question of imbalance in the mind. Actually, the imbalance of qualities in the mind, Bhagavan is very clear. We can get the balance up. We're not lost. We can get the balance up. How do we get the balance of sattva? We have to increase the sattva when we see too much rajas. That is karma yoga. Karma yoga is the way to increase sattva guna in the mind. See how beautifully everything is tied together in Bhagavad Gita? That lifestyle Bhagavan is prescribing is to increase your sattva guna in your mind, reduce rajas, reduce tamas. So that is why karma yoga Bhagavan is prescribing karma yoga again and again. It brings a balance to your thinking and again to your actions, because desire alone propels you to act in an improper manner. And what happens when you act on your desire improperly? The will doesn't have the necessary power to manage your particular desire. So the desire overpowers your will, actually. That is how you do the wrong thing. When the desire is stronger than the will, then you don't care about dharma, you compromise dharma, you don't care who you hurt or what you do. You can do anything to get that desire fulfilled. That is what Bhagavan is helping to prevent with these verses. So it is the natural consequence of such powerful desire. He says it's krodha. If you remember in this verse, frustrated desire is anger. In Shastra, very clearly, anger is not a separate thing. What is anger? Anybody who is very given to a lot of anger, it is nothing but frustrated desire expressing itself. It is not outside that is responsible. It is something that has been suppressed, and outside triggers it, it comes out. Bhagavan says, kama krodha, kama eshaha, krodha eshaha, the anger. If desire is obstructed, suppressed, or pushed aside without proper analysis or fulfillment, either you can remove desire by analysis, or you can remove desire by fulfilling it. So if you don't do either, then what happens? That energy converts to anger and it gets stored in the psyche of a human being. So you see this in crimes of passion, where like unrequited love, turns into anger, which drives the person to kill somebody else or murder somebody else. This is exactly what happens. That kama, intense desire, turns to anger, and then you forget yourself. The buddhi is gone. So this Bhagavan refers to in this verse as mahapapma. This anger and this desire turning into anger is called the great sinner, he says. It makes you regret your actions in life. You will live your life in regret and guilt if you allow this to take you over in life. That's why he says, mahapapma, be careful. Desire is also, he says, mahashanaha, insatiable. There is no satisfying it. It goes on multiplying. There is a never an end to your desires. They will keep coming back. Once you fulfill one, something else will come. We've seen this. Have a look in your life. See, when you fulfill a desire, are you satisfied fully? Do you need to fulfill any other desire? If you're satisfied fully, then you don't need to fulfill any more desires. But it doesn't work like that. One more is already ready to come up in your mind. One more is clamoring there in your mind to get up. So Lord Krishna wants us to understand more about the nature of desire in the next verse. He says, a very famous verse, he gives 3 examples of varying intensities of desire. If you remember this, he talks about 3 examples. He says, 3 types of, first of all, 3 types of viveka are required, discriminative analysis are required to run your life in a sensible manner. What is the first discriminative analysis that should be done? Karya akarya vivekaha. Karya akarya vivekaha means the ability to discriminate between what is to be done and what is not to be done. That's the first discriminative analysis we need to do. What is to be done? What is not to be done? The second discriminative analysis, he said, the mind should do is Atma Anatma Vivekaha. The capacity to see what is temporary in life, what is temporary and what is permanent, what is absolutely real. And again, that discriminative analysis will only come when you understand what Vedas and the Shastras say about the permanent thing in life. The only permanence in life is Ishvaraha. The only permanence in life is Bhagavan. Everything else is coming and going. And that is what our Vedas reveal again and again. So Atma Anatma Viveka has a second discriminative analysis. And the third one that the mind has to do is Purushatta Vivekaha. Purushatta Viveka has clarity regarding what you want in your life. The single pursuit of 24/7 limitless happiness is what you really want in your life. If you're very clear about what you want in your life, and you see that the means of knowledge to get what you want in your life is given in the Bhagavad Gita, is given in the scriptures, then definitely this value will come to the way of life Bhagavan is prescribing. You will find a value to living this type of life. So Viveka Jnana, this Viveka knowledge is self-revealing. It is like fire, but sometimes it is covered. That is what Bhagavan is saying in this verse. Because of desire, these 3 Vivekas get covered. How do they get covered? Like fire is covered by smoke. With a little fire, some desires are like fire, which is covered by smoke. What happens with a little effort, these smoky desires, you can dispel with a puff. You can just blow. Whew. Some desires, you can just analyze and then they'll just leave. You don't have to worry about it. So that is a very easy desire to get rid of or to remove from your psyche. They are like fancies that come and go in the head. You're not really bothered if they're fulfilled or not. So it's easy to recall your knowledge at that time and dismiss these desires. There's no problem with such desires. Now, Bhagavan, if you remember, the second example of desire he uses is a little more effort to dismiss. It is like dirt covering a mirror. When dirt covers a mirror, simply blowing on the dirt will not remove that dirt from the mirror, right? You have to make more effort. These type of desires, you have to make more effort. Get a cloth, wipe the mirror, scrub the mirror. And this is what he's saying, repeated vichara. These desires require repeated inquiry, using your willpower. You cannot just say no to such desires immediately, but you have to keep inquiring, and finally your intellect will win over the desire, and you'll see it is unproductive to follow such a desire, and you can get rid of it as well. So in this example, some distance between you and the object of desire may help. In the second example, sometimes it's good to keep a distance between you and the object of desire to understand, to get clearer thinking. So if you like, that's why sometimes in our Shastra we say, Vivikta Desha Sevitvam, keep yourself away from some sense objects for a while, length of time, until you're immune to them. Once you're immune to them, you can go near them and they won't affect you. But if they start dragging you towards them, and you want to not to be overpowered by it, then keep a distance. Sometimes distance and space helps. The second type of desire definitely will help. And the final example Bhagavan discusses, where there's a thick cover of desire. He says, like the fetus in the womb, you cannot dismiss this desire like the smoky desires or like the dirty mirror desires. These desires are very difficult. These are womb desires. They're the womb desires, meaning You depend totally on the fulfillment for your happiness. The child has to come out, the baby has to come out for you to feel okay. Otherwise, you will be suffering with that desire constantly in your womb. Very interesting example Bhagavan uses, womb desire. So you have this fiery, smoky desire, you have the mirror desire, and this is a very difficult desire to get rid of. You cannot. So Bhagavan says, how do you deal with these? These will only go in time and effort. They will only go in time, they will go. So be gentle with yourself, like you are with the baby in your womb. Be gentle with yourself. And during this time, effort is also necessary. It is like when a long-term relationship breaks up. The dependency doesn't go automatically, does it? It takes some time to heal the separation when the mind longs for that object again, longs for that person again. But constantly, he says, be vigilant to your thinking patterns, and repeated dismissal of recurring negative thoughts is the effort that's involved. It is not easy at all when you have this type of desire. These womb desires can be very, very difficult to remove, but it is not impossible. Bhagavan says it is possible. So in verse 39, Bhagavan gives a summary of these previous verses. Knowledge is hidden, he says, by the insatiable fire of desires. Again, he says, Nitya Vairina. He said, Nitya Vairina means it's your constant enemy. Be alert in life. This desire is not a passing thing. It has a permanent presence in everybody's life. And binding desires are born out of the sense of limitation. You feel small. You feel you lack. The more you feel you lack, the more you feel you have to get something to feel good about yourself. The more you feel you have to achieve something to feel good about yourself. So another way to watch that desires don't become your whole life is to see that you are already the sense of satisfaction. You're already the meaning of satisfaction. That is what our scriptures keep telling. Even if you can fake it and make it, you can see, why do I need so many things? I already have everything with me. I'm the source of all joy, source of all happiness, which is the truth. So he says, resolution of such desires can only fully happen when you see yourself as limitless, already fulfilled. And that is final knowledge. Otherwise, we spend our whole life, desire management is Bhagavad Gita, actually, desire management. So in verses 40, 41, 42, and 43, this is the end of the chapter, Bhagavan helps us to discover how do we manage our desires in life. The location of desire he talks about. When I know the location of the enemy, it is much easier to fight, right? If I don't know enemy's location, very difficult, like Obama, sorry, it's not Obama, yeah, Obama was looking for Osama bin Laden for how many years? Osama bin Laden was hiding first in Pakistan, then here, nobody could find him. They were bombing everywhere, Afghanistan, here. They did not know where the enemy was hiding. So for so many years, they could not find him. So they could only find him when they located him. They could find the enemy, neutralize the enemy. When the location of the enemy is known, you can neutralize the enemy. In the same way here, where is the location of this desire? What is the adhisthana of this desire? I can neutralize the desire when I know the location of these enemies Bhagavan is talking about. So in 40 and 41, he talks about it. He says the location of the desires is three locations, he says, the senses, the mind, and the intellect. As though locations, they're not locations, three levels of thought. Let's take it as three levels of thought. The senses first, the mind next, and then the intellect. These are the three locations of thought. The karma, the desire, he says, covers the wisdom, deluding the human being. So we need to see some facts very clearly. Almost all desires are in relation to sense objects. Everything, if you look in life, almost everything is in relation to sense objects. If we examine in our lives, without our sense objects, how do sense organs, how do objects become known? They cannot. So that is the first level of port of call. When the sense organs go after objects of desire, that is where I have to start nipping things in the bud. How can anything then become an object of desire if the senses don't go after it? It cannot. So the senses are the first adhisthana, the first basis for desires to arise in the mind. You'll see that eyes fall on something immediately, and you go into town, you see something in the window, you're saying, oh, I'm just window shopping. A lot of people go window shopping. They say this window shopping, just look in the window. Suddenly the eyes fall on something very beautiful, fantastic jacket. Although you have 100 at home, still waiting in hangers. You wear one a day for a year. You have that many jackets. You have 365. You can wear one every day, different, keep changing. But this eyes go towards this. What happens? Desire arises in the mind. What was the first port of call? Bhagavan says, senses. Senses are the first port of call. Not just with the eyes. Smell. You walk past a nice bakery. What a fantastic smell emanating from that bakery. You look, it's a very fattening cake that's being baked, full of sugar. It's not good for you, but the nose has dragged. Already the mind has gone there. And what happens? The feet drag you in, despite your will. You eat that thing and afterward regret it because why did I have that? That is going to put on 100 million pounds on me. And again, that is what desire does. It drags you. The sense organs are the first port of call. Poor sense organs, we cannot blame them. They're just data input, okay? We don't blame our sense organs. That is their nature. The nose, the nature of the nose is to smell. Nature of the eyes, as soon as I open the eyes, is to see. The ears to hear. The tongue to taste. But what? It is the mind. It is that is why he says, the senses bring in data, but where do desires arise? They arise in the mind alone. So it is the mind that is the second locus where as soon as, if you find the senses have allowed the object into your mind, and without mind, there's no such thing as desire. So the mind, it's triggered by contact with the external world through the senses, and it decides whether you go after the desire or not. So what decides whether you go after the desire or not? The mind has the desire, but what decides is the third port of call, which is the intellect. The intellect decides, it's a decision-making factor. It says, yes, I will get that jacket in the window. I'm going to get it, even if I have to pay, 100 installments to get that jacket, design a jacket, I will do it. The desire also, the intellect can say, no, I'm not going to go for it. I've got 360 jackets lying in my house. Why should I get another one? That is how the intellect should work. Whether it goes with the desire or it doesn't, that is the intellect. So how do we know the adhisthana? How do we manage the desire? This is where beautifully Bhagavan brings in the 41st verse, Shama Dhamma verse. It is the technique. I begin with Dhamma. Don't allow anything to enter the mind. Stop it at that level. Soon as you see the object, yes, soon as the thought comes, that desire thought, turn your head away or leave it. Leave that situation. Don't go after it. That is Viveka, first level of Viveka. Swami Chinmayananda very beautifully used to say, you should have a sign outside your body so you remember it. No entry without permission. You're the one who gives entry to the objects to come into your system through the senses. No entry without permission. So we have no control over our likes and dislikes. We have to understand these likes and dislikes are according to the nature, but we have control over whether we allow ourselves to be delivered into the hands of likes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes come because of some vasana, some karma. But I am the master. I decide, should I go with it or not? That's what Bhagavan is saying here. So Dhamma is the first thing. He says, rein in the senses. Don't go after. Then Shama is you have to resolve. You have to discipline your ways of thinking. Observe the patterns in your life. And you're alert. You don't condemn yourself. You don't get into self-blame for having desires, but you manage your desires. You accept. You accept this is a desire, but you decide, I will decide whether it's good for me to go with it or not. So this requires a certain deliberation in life. That is what Bhagavan says in this 41st verse. Discover space, a distance between you and the desire. And this is what Shamadhamma practice does. And the 42nd verse, he says, Indriyani paran yahuhu, indriyebhyah param manaha, manasastu para buddhi, buddhev paratasastutaha saha. Here he says that you're given a gradation of superiority. When Krishna says superior, he means more subtle. The sense organs are subtler than the physical body, but the mind is more subtle than the sense organs. So Atma, he says, he brings in the most subtle of all in the final verses. He says, Atma, pure consciousness, the meaning of I. If you step out, this is a stepping out verse, step out of yourself, you, Atma, are able to objectify the rest of everything, your mind, your intellect, everything. Step out of yourself. You are more than even the intellect. You are more than the mind. You are more than the senses. You're more than these desires. When you step out yourself, you move away from the location of desires. You discover that space, that distance between you and what is not you, anatma. Then you will truly master your desires. That is the way you come to master desires. You become master of desires, not a slave of desires. And in the final verse of this chapter, Lord Krishna gives Arjuna the strength to pursue this alert lifestyle. He says, Evam buddhev param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. He says to Arjuna in the final verse, use your intellect, use your discriminative capacity. I've given it to you. You can fight this greatest enemy of spiritual life, which is raga, dvesha, binding desires. They are durasada, very difficult to understand, but the power to overcome them is in each one's hand. You can do it. Durasadam means with difficulty alone, you can manage the karma, eliminate finally this karma. It is difficult to manage, but you can do it. Discover the space in yourself. That is the key. And knowing, again, seeing these levels where the adhisthana, the loci of desire, you can see that, then you can manage on all the levels. And knowing alone removes the enemy of desire finally and permanently, knowing yourself to be Atma. And this is, again, he brings in the second verse, the idea, giving up all desires. Vihaya kamanya sarvan. A wise person will have renounced all desires. He will have given it up. Or we can say, not that he gives up desires, desires will give him up. There is no reason to desire. If you discover yourself as fullness, where is the reason to desire? So desires eventually give you up when you discover the final knowledge. So the person who wants peace in life, Bhagavan is saying in this final verse, must not come under the sway of sense objects, must not allow sense objects to become your rulers. Nip it in the bud. You should avoid growing any longing towards them. As soon as that longing comes towards them, you're in trouble. You're in trouble for your life. So you stop it at that point when the longing starts coming. And he says here, this is the way you attain peace in life. And the absolute peace is when you discover the self. So relatively, he's given the antidote for these disturbances of mind, for restlessness of mind due to desire. Pujya Swamiji, Dayananda Saraswati, to finally summarize the chapter, he said very beautiful, lines. Only when karma makes you suffer by its presence are you a samsari. Only when desire makes you suffer by its presence are you a samsari. With knowledge, you can enjoy the presence of any desire and be free. That is the beauty. There's nothing wrong with desire. With knowledge, you can enjoy the presence of any desire and be free, which means what? You can desire. There is Ichcha Shakti is a gift given by Bhagavan. Every human being has Ichcha Shakti, the power of desire bestowed by the Lord. But are you desiring? What is the reason you're desiring? Are you desiring for happiness or are you desiring out of happiness? That is the difference. If you desire out of happiness, you can have umpteen desires and they won't bother you. If you desire for happiness, you will always end up disappointed, and all of this karma, krodha, all of these are consequences when you follow the desires for the sake of happiness. So with that, we see the chapter 3rd summary I'm finishing today. And happily, I'm so happy we finished right to the end of the verses. So these last final verses are very important. It is good to go over these verses in your life as well and see, how you can bring them into the picture. Every time, you find there's some longing or something in the mind and the mind is getting disturbed and dragged away in different directions, you can remember what Bhagwan is advising in these verses. So with that, we will just chant the end. When we end a chapter, we chant a particular section, Om Tat Sat, and explain the topic of the chapter. And we will go on to our fourth chapter next week. Om Tat Sat iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Karma Yogo Nama Tritiyodhyayaha Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyah Moksha Ishyami Ma Shuchaha Harihi Om Tat Sat Iti Shri Krishnarpanamastu.